Hello and welcome to Chelsea Lately. I'm Chelsea Handler. I've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking with my panel of experts about a hot old play called Oedipus the King, written by Sophocles. We'll be discussing the ways it succeeds with our special guest, Aristotle's Guidelines for Tragedy. And we're going to mess with Chewy, so that's always fun. The first member of tonight's panel is Kristen Longo, a gossip columnist from Greek Life magazine.
Hey, it's really great to be here tonight. I've always been a fan of Greek philosophers. They always have the juiciest gossip.
Next up is literary critic Emily Ken. She's not really funny, but she studied this stuff for a long time and is probably the only one of us who actually knows what she's talking about.
Hi there. It's always a pleasure to be talking about one of my favorite subjects. The structure and themes of Oedipus the King are just so fascinating, and it really covers all of the things.
We'll get there. Anyway, our final panelist is fellow comedian and a good friend of mine, Carolina Capostova.
Hi there. I feel like this is going to be really interesting. I feel like someone should make up a drinking game. Every time someone says plot, character, reasoning, diction, song, spectacle, structure, pity, terror, reversal, or recognition, do a shot! But only if you're 21.
Now, do you think it'll be fun tonight?
I'm thinking yes. So should we get started? Maybe it's time to actually discuss the play.
Is this the Emily Lately show? No. I didn't think so. Now it's time to talk about the play. All right, literary expert, what's this play about?
Well, Oedipus the King tells the story of the new king of Thebes, whose city is suffering from drought, famine, and death. In his attempts to save his people, he finds out the truth about his past, that he killed his father and married his mother, fulfilling a dark prophecy revealed at his birth. His birth parents had sent him away as a baby to be killed by a palace slave, but the slave took pity on him. Oedipus is adopted by King Polybus and Queen Merope of Corinth. He learns of the prophecy and leaves Corinth in order to avoid murdering his father and marrying his mother. But along his journey away from home, he meets and kills a man that is later revealed to be his birth father. And he goes to Thebes, saves the city from the Sphinx, and marries the queen Jocasta, but he later realizes that that's his mother. After these revelations, Jocasta kills herself and Oedipus blinds himself. He also asks his uncle and brother-in-law to exile him, and the play ends with the chorus lamenting Oedipus's tragic fate.
Okay, that's a lot.
I told you, the ancient Greeks had the best scandals. Seriously, this guy is abandoned by his parents who tried to kill him, then adopted by different royals, then he runs away from home, then he kills a bunch of people, including his birth dad, then he marries the widow of the guy he killed, who just happens to be his mom. Then his wife lady kills herself, then he pokes his own eyes out, and finally, he's kicked out of the palace and has to leave his children siblings behind.
Talk about a bad day.
You're right, it actually does take place over the period of a day. In fact, that's what makes Oedipus the King an accurate representation of a tragedy based on the ideas of Aristotle and poetics. A tragedy should be long enough so that the plot, is clear, but not too long as to be boring. It should only represent one action, not multiple at once, which is what Oedipus the King does.
Speaking of action, let's talk about Aristotle's 6 guidelines for tragedies.
That doesn't actually have anything to do with action, but I think I can make it work. The plot, So, the plot, in tragedies, according to Aristotle, has a beginning, middle, and an end.
Thank you, Sherlock.
I wasn't finished. Thanks for interrupting.
Sorry, not sorry.
Anyway, the plot shows only relevant actions, not a bunch of petty details about an old guy living in a city I've never been to who has some serious issues. Sophocles does a good job of sticking to a complex plot line, in one of which the solutions comes about as a result of the plot itself, and therefore is probable. Additionally, complex plots involve actions that result from transformations as Oedipus's actions do.
Okay, I've had enough of these shenanigans. As much fun as this drinking game is, if we keep yelling drink after Carolina says plot, the show is going to be way longer than 30 minutes. So let's move on to characters. I know Aristotle sets 4 guidelines for the characters of a tragedy. They have to be good, lifelike, appropriate, and consistent. Everything all of my boyfriend's words.
All of the characters in this play are all of those things, especially Oedipus. Oedipus is noble and virtuous. He's like a better and larger version of Chewy. Well, of everyone, even with his flaws. He makes the audience pity him as a hero because all of the horrible things that happen to him are a result of fate and accidental interactions. He didn't plan for any of these things to happen, but they did anyway. It makes people afraid that similar tragic things could happen to them, and they won't be able to do anything about it.
Everyone always talks so much about Oedipus, but I really think that it's important to focus on the other characters as well. I mean, Tiresias, the blind prophet, is very, very important. He's a very moral character, and Jocasta is another very important character. You know, she's the only female character in this entire play that has speaking lines. I mean, it's really incredible, and she is such a valuable role.
Why are we talking so much about the other characters? I mean, Chelsea Lately is called Chelsea Lately because it's about me. Just like Oedipus the King is supposed to be about Oedipus. Anyway, speaking of me and of speaking, now we're going to get to talk about diction. I know a lot about diction because I talk a lot. Diction is communication by means of language. The language used in tragedies is very important. The most important part of diction is clarity. If the language isn't clear, the audience won't be able to understand it. Just like Chewie. Because Chewie doesn't speak clearly, nobody can understand him. Are you still eating that corn dog?
Yes. Anyway, part of diction is the use of a combination of a variety of forms of speech and names, such as standard, exotic, lengthened, or altered names. Like how Sophocles uses singer instead of sphinx. I don't really get that. Is that like the sphinx is singing? I don't, it's just dumb.
Actually, it does make sense because diction also includes the use of metaphor, like that one. One name is often substituted for another, and you know what? I think that pretty much covers it. I think we've covered diction pretty well, so now I think it's important that we move on to reasoning, which is another one of the 6 points of tragedies that Aristotle points out in Poetics. So reasoning is being able to say what is possible or appropriate. And in Greek tragedies, these were not fantasies to these people. They were real, even though we see them as being mythological because of the gods and the mythical creatures, but they really were real to the Greeks that wrote them. So the events had to be logical and possible to occur. They can't be all accidental either because that would lessen the tragic part of the tragedy. Another part of reasoning is that adds to the tragedy of the play is the fact that Oedipus acted in ignorance due to his lack of knowledge of his own identity. There are 4 different ways you can act. You can either act with knowledge, you can act in ignorance, you can be about to act in knowledge but stop, or you can be about to act in ignorance but stop. And one of the most tragic of those is the way Oedipus acts in ignorance. Oedipus acted in ignorance due to his lack of knowledge of his own identity.
He doesn't really know the man in the mirror, not really recognizing his past and who he actually is.
Oh, man in the mirror. That is my song. Speaking of songs, song is also one of the 6 elements of a good tragedy. In tragedies such as Oedipus the King, Sophocles uses song as a character in its own right. The chorus not only provides a glee-ish burst of melody, it becomes an actor and a part of the plot as a whole. Song adds another embellishment to the story, much like how Sophocles uses scenery to add spectacle, another necessary component in a Greek tragedy. Song and spectacle give the tragedy its amazing quality, drawing the audience in and making it really interesting to watch. So basically, Greek tragedy is basically a much more depressing, intense, terrifying, gruesome, pitiful, and terrible version of the Broadway musicals we all know and love today.
Basically. We'll see you after the break.